Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Driving Connections. I'm Suvi Ghosh, your host and Executive Vice President of Dealer Authority. I'm really, really excited to have Tyson with me today. I talk to him every day, but now we can have a conversation in front of all of you guys to talk about leadership. I got a lot of feedback that you guys wanted to hear more about leadership, and through my experience on the dealer side, I've learned a lot. But over the 6 years that I was on the dealer side, I went from working my way up from the front lines to manager, director of sales and e-commerce, and I learned a ton. But in the last 2 years working with Tyson, I learned a completely different perspective on leadership and management and skills associated and what to read and who to look at. And so I figured it would be really nice to get a different perspective than what we hear all the time from someone who's had more of a corporate upbringing in his career. So thanks, Tyson, for joining me.
Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know Tyson, he is the CEO of Dealer Authority, and he always has the most amazing swag on of Dealer Authority, so I figured I'd condense him a little bit. But Tyson, you've been in the industry since '98. You've been in all sorts of different positions, from Reynolds and Reynolds,
right,
to Dealer.com and KPA, and through all of that, you and I have some interesting conversations about, most specifically, the recent one that we had is about using psychology not only in coaching your sales teams on how to talk to their clients, but also how you manage. So maybe we can start there.
All right. Well, it's interesting because anytime you work with a potential client or you work internally with your employees, you always have to take the personal side into it as well. So you really have to look at the professional side, and they always say leave the personal stuff at home. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work.
It's who we are.
So I think it's important, especially with the millennials coming into the workforce, that it's important to really look at the personal side, what makes that person tick, and truly tap into what is going to drive that person. So being on the sales side most of my life, it was always about money, do contests for money and things like that. But as you start to expand in your leadership, you realize that in different positions, people aren't always motivated just by money. There's other things too, and you really have to take that into account.
Absolutely, and I think that's a message that dealerships need to hear more often. Typically, a lot of management just gets raised by another manager, and they see what was done before them and they use the same skills, and that's normal. It's human. We all do what we've seen people do before us.
Sure.
But I think that is a message that they really need to hear, because as we talk about culture more, and as we talk about experience being so important to clients on the dealership side, to be able to identify each individual's needs and motivations is really, really crucial to the growth of your company, especially if you want to stand out as a different place to work and a different place to buy a car. So that's great insight.
You can have different cultures too in an organization. As you mentioned, a couple of companies I worked for, like Reynolds and Reynolds, was obviously when I worked there in the late '90s and the early 2000s. It was very much, I remember one of the first things that somebody told me when I went to work there is you'll retire from Reynolds and Reynolds, that it was a very family oriented company, and that there was a ton of nepotism there, and that basically once you signed on to work at Reynolds, you'll be there forever. And it had that sort of family atmosphere. It obviously changed over the years with getting bought out and everything. But then I moved over to Dealer.com, totally different atmosphere, because it was a young company at the time, small, probably 30 employees. And I remember the first time I went there were dogs in the office, people's offices, and it was just kind of a neat, totally different experience. But to see them grow and have a totally different culture, it definitely got you to realize that you have to be true to the owners and the management, to what their beliefs are, but you can have those two different styles and still have employees that are really happy
Right.
and really strong culture.
So why don't we talk about that real quick? So if you have ownership and management that maybe has a different culture for the store, how do you influence your own team with a different, what are some things that people could take back from this conversation and implement with their own specific teams? What have you tried that has worked?
Yeah, I think first the ownership really needs to understand what is their culture, what is their beliefs, what are they passionate about? Because if they're not passionate about it, it's not going to resonate down to
Right.
the employees. And then I think everything you do in your company, you have to realize, does this fit into our culture? And that includes hiring. Does this person fit in to the culture that we're trying to develop? So if you're looking at a salesperson on the floor and you're a one price dealership, no negotiating, that's a different type of salesperson
Right.
as opposed to maybe somebody that they wheel and deal a lot.
Right.
So does that person fit the culture of what we're trying to do? And I think a lot of times when the culture becomes off or starts to go in a totally different direction, it's because first off, management hasn't truly explained the culture and they haven't hired the right people that are going to exemplify the culture.
Right. Right. So if I had a specific team and maybe there's a negative culture. So we're talking right from the top, that's one thing. But let's say management has a negative culture. How do I change that for my team and try to stimulate maybe something better? Because you can't always change the top.
Right, right. So one thing that we're actually getting ready to implement is a leadership development program, and it's coming from the top. But what it's going to do is we're going to put the management team through a bunch of courses that not only teach them how to become better managers and the approach of our company, but also our culture, and then work its way down. Then we're going to have a development program for the employees that will take them through different classes to build them up in their competencies, but also get them to better understand who we are as a company.
One of the things that I really liked from your perspective that I've embraced is, really pushing your teams to be innovative themselves, because the changes, the rapidly changing environment that's happening around us, technology is forcing all of us to change, whether we like it or not, right? And ultimately, the people at the front lines, they're experiencing that change too. And if we don't empower them to understand what's happening and to be able to give us feedback and be able to talk about the things that they're seeing change, then we're kind of leaving out people that are going to be most affected by it in the first place. And so why is it important to empower your staff to be innovative and involved?
Well, I think it's important because as leadership, we're not doing the jobs of the people below us that are, we obviously do social media, we do SEO, we do all the digital advertising. And I know high level of what all of the different employees do, but when it comes to the intricate details of the challenges throughout the day and managing Facebook pages is are they using tools that are slowing down or inhibiting them from doing their job? I'm not feeling that pain. So to actually talk to the frontline folks that are doing those jobs every day, getting feedback from them, it's easy for me to just implement policies for them, but to truly understand if it's going to help them and not just so it looks good on a report for me is crucial.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. One of the questions that I wanted to answer myself as we talk about this is that if you are managing an internet team or a team on the sales floor, some of the ideas that I used in my sales team are things that are a little bit outside the box, and I would say to identify with your teams what it is. Like Tyson's been mentioning, really manage people by the individuals and not by what we've been taught to manage by, whether it be especially on the dealership side where we see money seems to be the greatest motivator, as so we think, but we're also seeing that not just on the dealer side, but throughout all industries, time is becoming exceedingly important. What are the other things that you're seeing, Tyson, that are being valued by employees?
Well, there's when we do surveys twice a year to ask employees, are they happy, are they not, what are things we could change, and then we follow up by an interview by one of our associates that does a really good job summarizing without letting people know who said what. And the things that we really see that are important to people, and what I've seen they like about our company is, and you mentioned it earlier, being part of making decisions. So especially being a smaller organization, seeing that we actually take the advice of them and implement those changes, I think it shows that everyone is valued and their opinions are valued. We've changed chat tools internally because we were using Skype, and hey, there's a better solution, and we started using that. We use different video tools. We tried out a lot of different things. We now have an award for somebody that comes up with a new solution that we implement, that they can get an award for it. So there's things like being part of decision making.
That's huge now.
Rewarding people, not just with money, but sometimes we did a fun Back to the Future thing, and so now you can win a really cool DeLorean model and proudly display that. So there's things. It's not always about the money. Money's always important for everybody, pay the bills, but there's things that you can do to pat people on the back and recognize them.
Right.
Let them be part of the decision. That's highly important, that we found that no matter what issues employees may be recommending that we make changes on, those are things that are highly important. And just being able to communicate effectively with not just their manager, but to have an open door policy at the highest of levels, that they have no fear of losing their job if they have some constructive feedback for myself, for JD, or for yourself, that they can go to and not worry about there being repercussions with it.
Well, I laughed a little bit earlier when you were talking about the surveys, because while everyone filled it out correctly and we had pretty good scores, I threw the curve because I didn't read it well, and I ended up giving us a 0 on something that clearly I didn't intend to do. So I did get one of those follow-up calls.
Yeah. I think you marked us completely unsatisfied about every category. It was like, that's probably not good for our executive.
No, it's probably not a good thing.
Completely unsatisfied with the direction of the company and things like that. It's like, wow, we should probably have a discussion to talk about this.
Probably. So yeah, okay. So the things that resonate with me about the way that you do it, that I've watched you do, is really paying attention to maybe what isn't being said out loud, and getting alternate parties to reach out and have those conversations. You guys aren't the ones asking them about the issues with management. I think a lot of management does that. Like, they approach the individuals or their sales teams and say, well, what's the problem? Tell us about the problem. But you know that when you approach someone, they're going to get defensive. And to have that middle person does make a huge difference when you're trying to ask them that feedback. So that's something that I definitely wanted to highlight.
Yeah, and I think, the tricky part, I think, with management is that you have to have consistency with the way you treat employees, obviously.
Right.
But you also have to take in the element of each person's personality. So how do you keep the consistency with your policies, but also understand that you have different personalities and you need to manage them differently? So I think there's that fine line that you have to walk between policies and personalities that always make it a little tricky.
Definitely. So as we talk about, how do we make this make sense to the dealership side, and we've talked about a few ideas, but I do want to talk about just being a leader in general isn't easy. You're always having to work on yourself, but you also have to make decisions that are sometimes scary. So when you started Dealer Authority, were you scared, and what did you do about it? How did you go about leading something brand new?
Was I scared? I wouldn't say I was scared. I've probably thought about starting companies 5 times, and 6 times over the years. And every time there was just one reason or not, it just wasn't the right time. I wasn't 100% confident in the delivery or being successful. And this time just seemed to be perfect. So JD obviously is a great mind in the digital space, and he had a lot of the same visions as I did, but we have definitely varying strengths. And so it just seemed like what his strengths were different than mine, and mine his, and it just seemed like it was going to be a really, really good fit. And it was a perfect time where a lot of companies were going sort of the big box, we can do everything for you. We were seeing that now dealers have been doing that for a while. All of a sudden, they were going to go back to realizing, okay, maybe we shouldn't buy everything from one vendor because they can't do the best of everything. So it seemed like the perfect time to do it, and I feel like we were right. So we had really good, quick success right out of the gate in our first quarter, and we've been profitable since the first quarter of our business, never taken any loans or anything like that, investment money. So I wouldn't say it was a calculated risk, I would say. And I've never regretted for 1 second starting the company. It's been, I joke with JD all the time that if we ever were to get out of this business, I'd be looking to start another one because I love it. I love having my own business, and it's been really, really rewarding for me. And don't worry, we're not getting rid of the business anytime.
That's good to know.
No, and we're really not building the business to sell. You see a lot of the technology companies where their goal is to get a few thousand clients and sell it as quickly as possible. That's never been our strategy. So
I will fight you on that.
Yeah.
We're working too hard. So just to go back to something that you said earlier that triggered open door policy. I think a lot of people say it, and not everyone does it right.
Right.
So what does it really mean to have an open door policy?
Well, I think first off, you got to be timely in your responses. So if an employee texts you, chats you, calls you, emails you, it doesn't take you a week to get back with them. It doesn't take your admin, or it'd be nice to have one of those, to get back with that person and see if you can schedule something. I think you have to truly take ownership of, somebody reaches out to you, you need to reach back out to them because they're the ones that are helping your business be successful. And then I think it's when they give you that feedback, taking action and taking it seriously, and say it's about their manager or something, and being able to constructively work on changing the relationship maybe with that employee and their manager without just calling up their manager right away and saying, hey, this person just threw you under the bus. So I think there's ways to subtly go about working with the manager to maybe correct some things that are bothering employees without just straight up saying this person said that, because that can harbor resentment between the manager and the employee, and it can also encourage the employees to not want to speak up in the future. My thinking is, if they have a true issue with the manager and they don't come to escalate it above, then it's just going to keep escalating with the resentment between the two of them, and it's going to cause other issues. So I think open door policy means that from my perspective, if somebody reaches out to me, I'm immediately reaching back out to them, and I'm taking action on it quickly. But I'm doing it also in a subtle way that doesn't make it very obvious to the other people involved what's going on, unless it's obviously a major issue where it's some kind of harassment or something like that, where you have to take very clear course of action. Luckily, we haven't had any of that yet.
Oh God, no, I don't want any of that ever. So knock on wood.
Right.
So just to tie things in, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but this is definitely something I want to hit. Back in your days at dealer.com, you wore a lot of hats, and I think that's something that a lot of people on the dealership side can really relate to. But that's more of a corporate atmosphere than what most dealers deal with. We kind of have this chaos sometimes because we're building departments that have never been there before, and you're functioning as a startup a lot of times in your own little bubble inside this world that has a lot of history in the way that it's been done before. So what kind of advice would you give people that that wear many hats from your perspective of being in a corporate world? Maybe we'll be able to pick up something for those people that wear many hats.
Right. So at dealer.com, I wore a ton of hats, and the thing that I did not do a good job of is communicating up. I was always good at communicating down to my teams and my employees, open door policy, and helping train and everything else. But I didn't do a good job of letting the upper management know what I was doing.
Right.
So it made it difficult for them to appreciate all the different things I was doing throughout the day and the week and the month. So what I would suggest to, especially like you mentioned, the internet manager or somebody like that, where it's maybe a newer department where the GM or the owner doesn't truly understand everything that goes into it, is to constantly communicate up, not in a complaining that I've got all this work, but to truly let them know what it looks like in the day of the life of you. Because if you don't, they're just assuming that, well, they're just, responding to leads and maybe updating the website. That's about all they're doing. And you hear that all the time when we talk to dealerships where, like, for instance, social media, where the owner will just, in the meeting, say, turn to the internet manager and say, well, why don't you just do this? You can do this, and just want to add on this other job to theirs. And you can just hear them kind of sigh and say, well, I don't have time. And you can see a little bit of that conflict sometimes. But I think it's because they don't truly know what everything they're doing. And that was my big fault. I blame a lot of that that huge workload I had at dealer on just the fact that I didn't know. When I ended up leaving and going to KPA, they hired a lot of people to end up doing the job I was doing. And then sometimes it was, well, you should be doing this, this, and this. Why aren't you doing all these things, which are more like forward-thinking, longer-term things? And a lot of people out there recognize that when you've got 8 people standing outside your door wanting to talk to you, and you got all these emails and everything else, thinking about long-term strategy is not on the daily docket. So that's my biggest recommendation, is communicate up. Make sure they know what you're doing. Make sure they know your job roles. If you don't have a job description written out, write one out for yourself. Write out exactly the job you're doing. And then if they want to throw on some other new technology on, or, hey, why don't you start doing walk-around videos, you can show them, look, this is everything I'm doing, and lay it out to them. So I think that would be my biggest advice.
That is great advice, because I think that what a lot of dealer employees feel is exactly what you're talking about, in the sense that they are getting all of this stuff put on them, and they don't know how to explain it and communicate with upper management on what it is they specifically do. And it's a conversation I actually had with my husband, who's not in automotive at all. And one of the things that enlightened me is that the moment he became a manager of that at that level in his industry, his biggest issue, especially for someone who's into programming and physically doing work, he just felt like he wasn't achieving anything. He wasn't really working, and someone's going to get upset because all he was doing was being in meetings all day. And unfortunately, what happens when you move into management is that you do less work sometimes because you're putting out fires, you're in these meetings, you're putting the structure and the foundation down, and so you ultimately feel like you're doing less work. And And if that's part of your job, then you need to kind of balance it out and maybe delegate some of the fires to somebody else.
And one thing I do, I actually did this at I think I did it Friday, is I wrote down everything I did for the day and go back and look at what is daily task-oriented stuff versus the future of the company. I just wrote it down on a notepad, just a page of stuff that I did.
My name on there.
Talk to be was on here, right here, but a couple times. But yeah, so I like to look at that once in a while to actually look at what is the things, especially being the CEO, what are the things that I'm doing that are just daily tasks that help keep the company rolling every day versus planning out, looking at the future, growing the company.
Yeah, because that's equally as important.
Absolutely.
Sometimes a fire can be delegated to their manager, even if they feel comfortable coming to you. It should still be delegated, because if you are only putting out fires, then you're leaving out the future of what it is that your department should be doing. So that's a great point. That's a great point. So let's wrap this up. I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. There's so much more that I think that you could influence the industry with, just from your perspective. Things like calendar blocking are things that I think every single internet director should learn about from you. So maybe we'll have you on to talk about that later. But being a leader of a company that's brand new, I think that you've put a lot of things in place. And unlike most of the people I interview, I got to ask questions to your entire staff because I am connected with all of them. And ultimately what came back was that you focus on the individual, you play with strengths and weaknesses and help people understand their weaknesses in a non-critical way. You put things in place that are important even if they don't realize it's important, to make us appear bigger or stronger than maybe we are at the time, but we grow into it really quickly. Things like 401k, things that many of us weren't even thinking about. The forward thinking, all of the things that you talked about, the fact that your employees can say that about you, I think, is something. And I say this all the time to sales managers in our space. It matters very little what you do or what you're capable of doing if your team can't do it themselves. If you can't make little versions of yourself and your sales team on the floor, it really doesn't matter what you've done in the past if you can't recreate that. So I think that's a little kudos to you. But also the message that I want to drive home. I think we can draw experience and inspiration from a lot of different people, and you guys should definitely follow Tyson. He's awesome. He's like hands down the best person I've ever worked for. I'm not just sucking up because we have to have a conversation later. But thank you guys so much for tuning in and for listening. One last question, Tyson.
Yes.
What is your biggest hope for the business? What is all of this coming to for your employees? Like if you could conclude all of this and relate it to Dealer Authority itself?
I would say that obviously we want to grow the business, but I'd like to see the employees that we have that have been very loyal. Going to work for a brand new startup is a little scary.
Terrifying.
It wasn't that scary for me, but it could be very scary for folks like yourself.
I was terrified.
That jumped on board early. You're employee number 2, the first full-time employee that we hired. And there's a lot of folks that we've hired on that have been with us since the start. So my hope is really to continue to grow the people in our organization that have been here, that have proven that they can grow with the company, like yourself, that have moved up to executive VP. Well done. And just continue to give back. So give back is one of our core values that we focus on, and I would love to see us continue to give back more to employees, and as the company grows and is more successful, the company is giving back to them as well. So that's my goal, is to constantly grow employees. And I always say I never get upset if an employee wants to leave to better themselves. I would like to think hopefully we're bettering them and growing, but I've had employees over the years leave where they went to work at other companies where they're amazing companies where I was, anything you need from me to be successful is great. Where other companies, it seems like they get really sensitive and really offended by that. And I just think that's silly. So
Yeah.
I think you can always look back and see what we've done better to grow that person so they would have wanted to stay. But we're all here to grow and be successful and make money for our families and things like that. I don't think you should ever take it personally if somebody finds an opportunity maybe better. But for me personally, giving back in the communities and giving back to our teams and growing them is my big goal for everyone.
That's awesome. So the reason why I wanted to conclude on that is because I think that as managers, anybody who's listening, managers, directors, if you're managing anybody, you should be able to answer that question. And I think, Tyson, that was an awesome response, and it's so true to who you are. And I hope that Tyson's inspired you in some way to maybe rethink the way that you're managing your team, maybe rethink how you're approaching them or how you're communicating with them and how you define an open door, or maybe valuing what matters to them, whether it be time or time off or the ability to be innovative in their jobs or to make them feel like they're a part of the decisions being made. Those are all great points that I wanted you, as people that have been kind of raised in the dealership side, to have a different perspective. I know that it really impacted me to be able to learn from Tyson every day over the last 2 years now. I think that it really expanded the way that I viewed managing and how I did it. But there's a lot that you can do. I used to do things like outside the box, where we would have, for all of my team that would communicate with the salespeople, we would have a salespeople draft. So all of the internet team that maybe would have a great relationship with one person, that person was really, really great at their job, the other people almost felt left out. So they would be able to trade with each other and be able to grow in their roles. We did all sorts of fun things. We used to give away days off because time with our bell to bells is a huge thing. So you can get creative. I hope that Tyson's inspired you as he's inspired me. Tyson, how do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more or contact you for some insight?
Yes, so you can always email me at Tyson, Tyson, at dealerauthority.com, or my cell phone number is 704-641-6967. And Subi, with your last statement, one thing I thought of too is get a mentor. So
absolutely,
find somebody that you respect. Maybe he's been doing it a little bit longer than you. Maybe they haven't, but they have fresh ideas. Start your own kind of 20 group of internet managers and start sharing from different parts of the country. Things like that, I think, would be really helpful. So most of what I've learned was from, I had a professional coach at KPA, Colleen Stanley, who's great at just bouncing ideas off of. And then I had a life mentor, my dad, that has been a good influence as well over the years.
I'm a huge fan of Tom. He's the best.
Tom's great.
So yes, thank you so much for that. And if you don't have a Genius Network, create your own little group of people and peers around the country. Like Tyson said, it worked for me really well. Because it's people that are in your shoes. They may not have the exact same brands or the same city, but the situation, the challenges are always the same. But yes, you can contact Tyson at Dealer Authority. You can contact me at Subi at dealerauthority.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Subi101 or at Ask Subi. Thank you so much for joining yet again. We'll be continuing this conversation about leadership from a lot of different perspectives in the industry. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you for the suggestion for the episode, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you, Tyson, for joining me.